So as you know, we've been doing a series on what the Sefer Yetzirah calls the double letters and their energies as it's related to our inner court. And the Kabbalists relate this inner court to mostly our inner nervous system, brain, all of the spinal cord related to chakras and stuff, and various parts. And we've been looking mostly at the brain, this part that's called in general by neurologists, the basal ganglia. So the center of the brain is the thalamus. So we've been going through each one of the 7 letters and their energy relations according to the Book of Formation, this ancient book that we learn a lot of our meditation practices from. So we did last week Kaf. And as we know, every one of these letters is a name, really. It's not just a letter like in the English alphabet. In the English alphabet, A is A, and B is B, and C and C. In the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph is actually spelled Aleph Lamed Pei. So it's a name, it's more than one letter. Same with Bet. Same with Kaf, which is the letter we studied last week. Kaf happens to be Kaf Pei. And now the next double letter is Pei. So there's a movement or a connectedness here, right, with the energies of these vibrations. And every one of the letters, more important than how they look, is their sound vibration. So their vibrational even before they become sound. There's sort of like an energy vibration, according to the ancient Kabbalists, that is really consciousness vibrating. And that consciousness, that pure holy consciousness that was called Ein Sof, which means without end, is a unified field consciousness within all of us. It unifies us with all of creation and one another. And that is that Holy of Holies within us, and that vibration of that pure consciousness in that Holy of Holies becomes sound. And as that sound continues to vibrate, becomes light. So as we're in the Holy of Holies within us, deep within us, that's represented by the letter Aleph, which is just really pure silence, sort of a vibrational silence, like the effervescence of soda or something like that, that kind of energy. And we talked last week about Kaf being related to the thalamus, which is in the center of the brain, and understood to be how we experience as humans consciousness. The center of the basal ganglia in the brain, we experience consciousness. And then the other parts of the basal ganglia, now going forward to the Pei, let's say is related to what's called the substantia nigra in the basal ganglion. I'm no neurologist, but like I said, there's a book out there by, I forget the author's name now. Anyway, if I remember, but I said it in the last couple of lessons, that goes through these details, and he is a neurologist. And it's an interesting study. It's definitely a college level book, but it's interesting. But at the core of the issue is, as these parts of our brain and nervous system, including our spinal cord and all the complicated string theory nerves that are connected, through the consciousness and through the parts of the brain sending and receiving messages, largely through our senses, but also through all of these complicated nerves and neurons and so forth within us, as long as we maintain what they call neuroplasticity, which is just being flexible and allowing ourselves to be non-rigid, these things change in our ability to experience consciousness as it flows naturally from the Holy of Holies within us becomes purified and grows like that. So if we look at Kaf as a name, the letter Kaf connected with Pe, that brings us to Pe. And Pe's planetary influence is Venus. And I love this letter Pe because not only is it related to love in that sense of Venus and that energy of that, but it's very transformative. All the letters are transformative, but Venus particularly. And the Kabbalists would like to use the story of Joseph and the name of Joseph as an understanding of that transformational power of the letter Pe. Because as the energy of Joseph's name, right, that Samic becoming the Pe, it's turning anger into grace. So that transformative nature of the Pe is sort of critical to our experience of the energy of the letter. The letter Pe actually means mouth. And the letter Kaf is sort of like a spoon. So it's like a spoonful of consciousness, coming into our mouths and coming out of our mouths. But Pe is spelled Pe Aleph. And that has a foundational meaning in the letter energy. So if Aleph represents the energy of that pure silence, pure consciousness within us, when the Pe is connected to that energy, then that pure consciousness flows within and without us. So the Sefer Yetzirah says with each one of these letters, as it's describing their energies, it says to make a king out of the letter and allow it to sit on its throne. That's poetic language. And what it means practically to us, as I was taught and my teacher was taught and his teacher was taught, well, like that.
Okay.
It means allowing the letter and its vibrational energy to transcend from the conscious thinking level into the subconscious. And where its throne is at the point of the Holy of Holies, is at the Aleph. So the letter allows us to transcend and then it disappears. And that disappearing of that letter in our meditation. So if we're meditating on the letter Pe, we just gently and effortlessly experience that energy. And as that energy transcends, it gets finer and finer levels of the relative till it falls into the absolute. And that's sitting on its throne. So here the Pe itself tells us we have Kaf, which is sort of our sunshine. Its energy comes from the star that is the sun. And that sun is that light that happens within us coming out from these sound vibrations. And the Pe, which represents the mouth, and the sense of speech, the sense of taste, all of those things, receiving and giving in our words. The teaching here is that it's when it's connected to pure consciousness, it's transformed into its foundation, which is beauty and grace. So the Sefer Yetzirah says the foundational energy of the Pe is beauty, grace, like that. And its transpose is ugliness. So when the Pe is connected and when we touch consciousness within ourselves, in our meditation, mindlessly, and in our world of action, mindfully, what we say is transformed into beauty and grace, the foundation of the energy of the letter. And we know that whatever our beliefs are, we don't have to be Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, whatever, atheist, doesn't matter. we know that what words that we speak and the energy of what comes out of our mouth really affects not only ourselves, but our friends and our family and people that we know. And it affects trees and nature and everything all around us. And they've actually done studies that show the effect of sound on things in nature like plants. And there's a Japanese doctor who did studies with mantras and sounds and even thoughts on water and the effect of on an atomic level what's happening with the molecules in water. And there's vast difference. You can see it. So the point is, we come from the sunshine and the thalamus and the reflection of pure consciousness, bubbling up into thoughts and speech. And the pay is reaching out to us and saying, if I'm connected with myself, if I sit on that throne and I'm connected with pure consciousness or the divine within me, then I'm purified in your particular life. So that's really what's relevant, is having the neuroplasticity to say, I'm willing to change the way I think and speak and the way I behave by touching consciousness, by connecting that energy of speech, that energy of thought with the pure silence within us. If we use the Veda, we always go back to that, the words of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, which is yoga stat guru karmani. Established in union, yoga means union, perform action. So that's saying the same thing. Speak established in unity first. Now, an important piece of this, as I'll close and we'll meditate, is that it's a work in progress, right? So the more we touch consciousness, the more transformative that energy is within us. And the more we touch consciousness, the more our speech and our thinking is transformed into beauty and grace. But along the way, we shouldn't have these huge expectations of, we'll never say another negative thing, just because we're meditating or just because we know that we shouldn't, we will. So, but it feels different when you do it. You get closer and closer to regretting saying bad things, gossiping, and not uplifting one another. My experience is when it happens and comes out of my mouth, very shortly thereafter, I feel like that didn't feel right. Because the more we meditate, the more that pure consciousness is present within us. And we say something like, oh, Jim Lutz, he's such a schmuck. It doesn't feel right. It's like, oh, that's not true. Jim's a great guy. I love him. And I feel really bad about saying that. Unfortunately, once it comes out of your mouth, you can't take it back. So we do need to be mindful of touching consciousness before we speak. And that's really critical. But it naturally changes, and it is a process, right? So that process, we have some acceptance of the fact that we're human and not perfect, but we're also fluid enough to change and transform. And this letter is really a primary transformative thing. And we go back to the story of Joseph. His brothers threw him in a pit, if you remember, and he was sold off as a slave to Egypt. So he had every right to be extremely angry with his brothers, but instead he was graceful and he forgave them, right? So That's a great story, I think. It always makes me cry every time I read it in Torah. Anyway, if there's no questions, or you can wait and have questions after we meditate, we'll do our meditation.